Okay, so this is going to be a little bit of just a chat and so, because I've had something happen, and sometimes you just have to know that you're not actually crazy in how crazy something was, especially when it's involving trauma. So if you're new here, this might be a little bit of a wild video, but so I was raised in a cult, and I know that I mentioned that I would bring this in at some time somehow. Today, when my hair is all frizzy because it's been pouring rain and I walked the dog, and then I had an appointment and I gave up on my hair because rain, I didn't think that I would be here, but here I am. So my parents were also extremely abusive, and I know I have touched on that. I have no contact with them. I've been no contact with them for a long time, thank goodness. So in the, and for reference, because it's out there and it's available now, and it's a little surreal for me at this point to see my childhood on display nationally, publicly. I was raised in ATI, which is the same cult that is featured in, well, it's the cult featured in Shiny Happy People documentary. And I was raised all the way through in that, so would be kindergarten year to past when I quote unquote graduated, and was still in it. My parents were still in it till sometime after my oldest son was born. So yeah, anyway, quiverful patriarchy, ultra conservative, legalistic cult, all that stuff. So my parents are guilty of abuse in nearly every form on a horrific level, and the documentary was wild to watch because when I got married to my husband, I had not even processed the fact that I had been raised in a cult yet. And now it's very public. So anyway, it's wild. And if I smile, please know it's because it's wild. And I know for me, and I think for a lot of other trauma survivors that I have talked to, humor is a coping mechanism. Laughing has been a coping mechanism. You look at situations where any sane and reasonable person would look at you and say, that's not funny, but we still find the humor in the situation because otherwise we won't make it. So anyway, that's a long preamble to... So one of the things that my parents did was medical neglect, and about the time I was about 10 years old, they stopped going to all doctor's appointments. So stopped getting vaccines, stopped getting regular checkups, and you know, I believe there were a lot of reasons under that besides the whole you don't need a doctor brainwashing, you just need Jesus situation. It was also a doctor would be able to catch up, would be able to pick up on signs of physical abuse, which were very evident. So if they took us to a doctor, they might get caught. So anyway, they did, however, go to who my husband and I now jokingly call the witch doctor, who was a woohoo chiropractor. And he was the only person that my parents trusted us to see. But he had all kinds of crazy stuff, and so I say that he wasn't directly responsible for some of the medical abuse, but I think he was indirectly responsible because he convinced my parents of so many things. Like, okay, he had this liver cleanse where, I'm sorry if this is too TMI, but this is what it is. If you, okay, so the liver cleanse was you spend a whole day drinking Epsom salts, which cleans you out, by the way. And then once you're completely cleaned out, oh, and you're not eating food during any of this. Once you're cleaned out, that night you drink a mixture of pure olive oil and lemon juice. And that was supposedly supposed to cause your gallbladder to eject anything that it needed to eject. And then you spent the next day, also not eating, drinking Epsom salts again to then flush all of that stuff that supposedly your gallbladder flushed out completely out of your system. So the one time that my parents actually forced, I would say my mother at this point, actually forced me to do that, I got so sick that night and so sick the next day that I could not finish the regimen. I couldn't finish the Epsom salts the next morning. I was too sick. And so I think because I got so violently ill, I don't know if it scared my mom or whatever, but at that point, she stopped trying to force us to do them in a way. However, the medical neglect came in really heavily as I have asthma and other major allergy issues and other problems, and we were denied all forms of medication from there on out with the, well, if you haven't done a liver cleanse, you don't get medicine. So, like, I need a Benadryl, my eyes are swelling up, I can't see, I can barely breathe. Well, have you done a liver cleanse? Well, then you don't get medicine. And so there was that. And also, when we would see this man, it was an all-day affair. So if she had an appointment with him, we would go to his office, which was probably about 45 minutes away from the house that I grew up in. And we would stay all day, like literally all day. We would get there probably around 9 o'clock, and then it would be dinner time before we would get home. And we wouldn't see her for a good portion of this day. She might pop in and out just to verify that we weren't doing something crazy. But many of those days we were holed up in the waiting room with schoolwork or something else, or one of our many papers that we had to write for whatever, goodness knows what reason. But then also, she would make us stay out in our 15-passenger van out in the parking lot. Now, I'm a mom. If you're new to this channel, I'm a mom. I have 5 kids. And my middle child is almost 11. And I was about 11, 12 when this started. And I'm the second oldest of 8. And so the amount of days that we spent in the parking lot of that doctor's office, just in a big, ugly, brown 15-passenger van in the middle of South Carolina summer heat. We were allowed to open the van doors, but it's just like, what? Like, I can't, it was so normal to me that we were stuck out there that I can't, as a mom now, like, I cannot. Tell me that's crazy. Somebody tell me that that's absolutely insane to leave all of your children in a parking lot in the middle of not the greatest part of town in a van while you're in a doctor's office for hours upon hours upon hours. And obviously this would span over lunchtime. Well, we were never allowed lunch while we were there. That was not okay. Well, as I hit my teen years, and this was the routine because she wouldn't leave us at home no matter how much I could babysit my siblings, because she would say she couldn't trust us. And what she meant was she was starving us, and she didn't know that if she left us at home, we wouldn't figure out how to get ourselves some food, because we would have, let's be clear, because we were starving. But she couldn't trust us, so I would still have to go, even as a 16-year-old, 17-year-old. By this point in time, I had managed to save out a little bit of spending money from little like babysitting jobs or helping an old lady at church clean or something like that when they didn't steal it. Most of the time they stole it, but I was able to usually hide a little bit. And I used that money during those multiple hours to there was a pharmacy attached to the office where the chiropractor worked, and I would sneak into the pharmacy and buy bottles of Benadryl, Tylenol, and then candy bars. And I had a bottle of Benadryl hidden outside. I had a bottle of Benadryl hidden inside because she would deny me medicine all the time, and I had severe allergies. Well, let's be real, I still have severe seasonal allergies. And I don't know how I would have made it without those bottles of hidden medicine. I know that that's dangerous, that a teenager just would go buy medicine and take it, but I did read the dosage bottles, but I was miserable. And then the candy bars, I would usually split with one of my sisters. We had to hide it from my younger siblings because they would have tattled on that. But anyway, I was always in utter terror that we would get caught doing that. Or that someone that worked in the pharmacy, because they were friends with the chiropractor and his people over there, would say, hey, she was in there buying medicine. I took that risk because I was that miserable. But anyway, and why does somebody need to be in a doctor's office, in a chiropractor's office for an entire day? Like, somebody tell me that. am I crazy? Am I crazy that that's not okay? Like, it's so wild. And then what has brought all this back is I'm in another city now. I'm not in the city where I grew up in. I know I'm not too far away, and I'm in the same state. I'm still in South Carolina, but I'm not in Columbia. I have not seen this man, this chiropractor, in 18 years. The last time I saw him, there was also trauma involved, because it involved the trauma that is with the birth of my son, which that's a whole other story of how he's even involved. It's cult brainwashing, and I will tell that story because it is wild and crazy, but that's not the point here. But I was having coffee with a friend the other day. It was like late last week in a small little coffee shop not too far from my house, and I swear if it was not that doctor, it was his twin. But he walked in, I believe it was him that walked into that office. I have not seen him. He has white hair now, but my body went into complete PTSD, trauma, flight, panic response at the sight of him. So everything in my body believes it was that doctor. And my poor friend that I was having coffee with, she's like, what, who did you see? Who is it? Like, what is it? I'm over there not able to breathe, like full on panicking, looking for an exit. I'm trying to, like, hiding my face, like, please, 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 praying. That man did not recognize me. Thank goodness he didn't either see me or recognize me. One of the two or both. But I don't know. I don't know that you could have prepared me that would have been my body's response to seeing him for the first time in this many years. But I look back now, like when I first got out of all that mess, you know, I had not processed that I was raised in a cult. I had not processed a lot of the abuse yet. And I was not a mother of children other than an infant. At that point, I had one infant. I now have 2 high schoolers, an almost middle schooler, and twin little boys that are 7. And like, I look back at what we did, and it is just, sometimes I feel like I need a sanity check. Like, was it really that crazy? Was it that crazy? Because part of me is like, okay, well, it was, you know, not in a horrible, it wasn't the best part of town, but it wasn't in a technically dangerous area. We were there were adults around, but we were in the van. Number one, we were in a hot van. Yes, we were allowed to open the door, but it still was a cooking oven van in the middle of South Carolina's summer heat. But then also, why was she in the doctor's office that long? And I would not in a million years leave my children out in a parking lot for 8 hours at a time, with maybe checking on them once to make sure that they're not doing anything that they're not supposed to be doing. I don't know. But yeah, so that happened. So I didn't expect that, and my brain was like, why is he in the city? Why is he here? And I know that, you know, the world is small. Sometimes people don't give credit for how small the world really is. And I can't expect him to not ever travel, but it's just, that threw me for a loop. So anyway, that is my crazy wild story. I'll jump into the birth story in a second. Okay, I'm back. I had to go check on the puppy, who is napping, and sew a few seams so that I could start pinning the next one. Anyway, part of me, and the reason sometimes I feel like I'm crazy, is because I know that back in the 90s, parenting didn't look like it does now. And I know that there's other things that I did that I would feel were more in the line of normal that I still wouldn't be okay with my kids doing. So part of me is like, was it just that? Was it just different times and that was considered okay? So I don't know, but part of me is like, no, there's no way. It's wild. It's stupid. That's insane. So I don't know. That's why I sometimes ask the questions, because it's like I just legitimately don't know. But as far as how he is involved also, so one of the things about ATI and that mindset that I was raised under was that any type of medical assistance in giving birth was a sin. So I was wholly brainwashed to believe that if I accepted an epidural or assistance, unless it was medically necessary because my baby was in danger. Doesn't matter, my life was in danger, just the baby's life. And even then you kind of push it to the end because you don't get medical assistance. So 2 weeks before my due date with my oldest child, he flipped. So he was head down up to that point, and then he flipped. I know because I was having doctor's appointments weekly at that point, and the one appointment he was in correct position, and then a week later he wasn't. And I really did not want to start my parenting journey with a C-section. Like, that was one of the big terrifiers for, like, I was absolutely terrified of that. And my mom had started with a C-section, and I didn't want to. And I had a few dreams about my motherhood and birth and being able to fall under that category of I didn't have medical assistance. But it wasn't just because it was this pie in the sky dream that I had, that I thought I was better than other people. It literally boiled down to I felt like I was sinning, like actually sinning, and then God was going to judge me if I did. And so it was terrifying. The thought of getting medical assistance was absolutely terrifying. Like, besides just going to the doctor, I knew I wasn't going to do a home birth situation like my youngest brother had been, but I didn't want a C-section. I wanted to nurse, all these things. Well, they tried to schedule my C-section right away because I was 2 weeks from my due date at that point, and they're like, well, we have a breech baby, you have to get a C-section. And I doubled down and I said, no, I'm not going to have a C-section scheduled right now. He's not due yet, so if I'm not in labor, I don't believe he's ready to come out. If I do have to have a C-section, this is what I remember saying, and I still stand by this statement. If I have to have a C-section, I want to wait until he's ready to come out before I have a C-section, or he's in actual danger. I don't want to just have a C-section because we need to have a C-section 2 weeks before his due date, but nobody can give me a good reason why. I still feel that way, by the way. So that's just me personally, but that's how I felt then about this. And so I went to this chiropractor because he was the only one that I knew. And at that point, like, I hadn't pieced together anything. I didn't realize I was operating under any type of brainwashing. I thought, he really cares about our family. I've been seeing him since I was 10 years old. Maybe he can help me. Now, he had this thing, one of his woo-woo things that I say now, that he called was a laser. And this laser thing was like, you would lay there and he would put it on the top of your head, and it was supposed to align a lot or something in your, fix a lot of things in your body. Well, I don't think the laser did anything to help my boy flip, but I think the actual adjusting and other things that he did, because he loosened my hips and put my pelvis back where it was supposed to be because it was really off, my son flipped. And over the course of the next 2 weeks, we did successfully get him to flip back head down about 4 or 5 times. And then almost as soon as he would get down, he would flip back. Now, I felt like jungle gym was happening in my womb at this point, because he was 7 pounds 6 ounces, I believe, when he was born. No, that was my daughter. He was 7 pounds 3 ounces. But still, it was a little bit over a 7-pound baby, and it was my first one, so, everything was a little bit tighter, didn't have as much little belly flap, all that type of stuff. So, I could feel it, and I could feel he was moving, and what I think the doctors told me they figured out later after the C-section was that whatever position he was in when in utero, when he was head down, it was clamping the cord to where he wasn't getting enough oxygen. So the reason he kept flipping was to save his life, was to keep him healthy and give him oxygen. But obviously I didn't know that. I'm sitting there thinking, oh, well, we have successfully got him to flip, so we're gonna keep trying. And this chiropractor had a friend that ran a birthing center, and I wasn't going to the birthing center. They didn't take insurance, and my husband and I didn't have any money, so, but she volunteered to, he called her and she volunteered to check me the day I went into labor for free to see if he was back head down again. And from what she could figure out, he was head down when she checked. Now, there were a few hours that went by after that. She didn't actually do an ultrasound. She just checked with her hand. So I don't know. All I'm telling is the story. By the time I got to the hospital, I had already been in labor for over 12 hours, and it was pretty hard labor at this point and pretty consistent on the contractions. Well, they checked me immediately because I had been flagged as breech baby, which was a good thing because I did in fact have a breech baby. And they did the ultrasound and he was still breech. So I don't know if he had flipped in between being checked and that and getting to the hospital. I don't know. All I do know is by the time I got to the hospital, he was back with his butt on my cervix. So he was V'd up, his butt was on my cervix, and his head was up in my rib cage. And of course they're like, okay, C-section immediately. Well, I was still brainwashed. And here's the thing, I wasn't able to tell this part of the birthing story for a long time because it was very traumatic for me, but also I felt like the trauma was my own fault. But what I did not realize is that I was operating wholly and completely under a brainwashed mindset that I did not realize I was still in, and or that I was in at all. And so still utterly petrified that God was going to send some awful judgment on me or my son if I did accept any medical intervention before trying. I was convinced that I needed to try to birth him naturally. So the hospital made me sign a whole stack of waivers, but they didn't fight me on it. And I kind of wish that they had fought me a little bit on it, but they didn't. But one of the reasons I figured out now why later is actually they knew, at least several of the people in that hospital knew of this chiropractor, and he showed up with me because now I will say, I think he was trying to be supportive, but it is crazy that he was in the room when I was in labor. But he was trying to be supportive, I think, in a way, but there's so much trauma associated with it that, like, I can't, I wouldn't be able to talk to him clearly, as was demonstrated by my story about seeing him or believing I saw him. So he was there through a lot of my labor, but I also remember him saying a few things that further amplified the guilt I was already feeling. And now I say this thing, I don't believe he did it on purpose. It's just the way it was. But his daughter had just given birth, and I don't know if she'd had some complications, but I remember him saying something in the haze of in between horrible contractions that, you know, his daughter just realized at some point she just gonna have to buckle down and nobody else was gonna be able to push that baby out for her. She was just gonna have to push it out herself, and by Jove, she did it. And it's like, I took it as you're just gonna have to, like, you're not trying hard enough. You're just gonna have to buckle down and push that baby out. Well, over 24 hours of labor that I still never had any pain medication for, and we were talking really hard labor, my cervix never dilated, like never past 4 centimeters. In all of that time, it remained solidly at 4 centimeters. So I was considered in active labor, but it wasn't going any further. And so also my water never broke, like never. By the way, 4 pregnancies later, my water still never broke by itself. It had to get broken on the 2 VBACs that I did. But yeah, never broke, and I never dilated any further. And you could see, at some point, they hooked me up to the machine where you could see my baby, and every contraction, you would see him go down, and then as soon as the contraction would let up, he would spring back up into my ribcage. Nothing was happening. At some point, this doctor finally left the room. I don't know how long. By that point, my brain was gone, but I know that at some point when I realized he wasn't there, I knew I felt finally the courage to say, I cannot do this. And I remember looking at my husband in complete desperation before another contraction. It's like, I cannot do this anymore. I said, I gave them the go ahead, and I got pulled into almost like, they started prepping me almost immediately, and I got pulled in for the C-section. And to his credit, while I do wish the doctor that was on that night had maybe taken a little bit of time to explain why my son wasn't going to come out naturally. You know, I don't know. I can't get into his brain. He was a really good doctor. He did an excellent job. 2 children later, the nurse at the hospital delivering that was helping me after I delivered my 3rd child couldn't find my scar. She was like, wait a minute, I thought you said you had a C-section in your history. She literally couldn't find it. That's how good of a job he did. So, like, he did a good job. But, like, partly why that day was so traumatic is because by the time they got me in there, I was already going into a panic. Complete panic attack. In the operating room, I remember they started to strap a oxygen mask to my face, and almost involuntarily, like, I grabbed it and flung it across the room. They had to hold me to the tape. Like, I was in panic and convulsions, and then they finally got me, like, numbed from the waist down. I don't remember how it all went down, but I remember they held my son up over the curtain, went and cleaned him up. Someone briefly brought him over, and I was able to kiss his head, and then they knocked me out to put me back together because I was in, like, my body was uncontrollably shaking. I couldn't think, and all I remember was them walking my son away and me not being able to hold him. And so that's partly, clearly my voice is shaking a little bit. It was very traumatic. They did let my husband go with him, and I remember desperately saying, before not remembering anything else, like, don't let anybody else hold him because I haven't held him yet. So recovery was its own thing, and I have not seen that doctor since that. I think maybe I saw him brief, like, for one, like, adjustment a couple of months after my son was born. But that's the last time I saw him. And for years I thought I was stupid. Why? Like, and trying to tell anybody this story, I felt stupid because it was like, I let that guy in my labor room. Like, and I'm sure that the hospital thought I was crazy. And it's like, I was, probably, but I was also brainwashed, and I had to stop beating myself up over it. But I did have to also get over it and figure out and learn that, you know, it wasn't a sin to do what I did. God wasn't going to judge me for it, but, like, that was a journey. So anyway, that's how he was involved in that story and birth and all of that. So anyway, that's wild. And I've never really publicly told the story at this much detail. So anyway, I'm just curious what your thoughts are. I'm going to go back to sewing now. Oh, and I just remembered one of the other things that he told me and my husband during the process of trying to get our son to turn head down again. I don't remember his exact words, but I did check with my husband, and he and I both understood the same thing out of it. So if anybody tried to come back, like, he did not say that. This is how both me and Matt understood what we were being told, was that the reason that our son flipped was that I was allergic to my husband. And he had Matt swallow something that Matt said tasted like sawdust, that he said supposedly changed the chemical something in him so I wouldn't be allergic to him, and that it's because I was allergic to him that our son was breached. So anyway, again, that's how we both remember it and how we both understood what we were being told. And Matt still hasn't stopped talking about that sawdust pill all these years later. So anywho, that's why we refer to him as the witch doctor. That's just what we say. People can argue whether or not that's warranted, but that's what we say. So anyway, that's it. Story time. That's what that was. So there might be a few more of those in the future. This is just so wild, and I haven't thought about it in so long that part of me is just like, oh, it really wasn't that crazy. But no, that's what it was. Hope everybody's having a great day. I am going to put the next video about my daughter's Anastasia dress out very soon. Just haven't gotten to it. One of my twins brought home the stomach bug last week, so we're all recovering from that. My oldest son is the only one that made it out unscathed from that. So yes, I'll be back with that video soon, hopefully. Anyway, there might be more story times. I know this was random. I don't even know who's gonna watch it all the way through, but this was my life. So I'll see you in the next one. Toffee, come here. Come here. Go say hey. It's raining today, so someone got wet. Had to go to the bathroom, and we had to go on a walk in the rain, and he got all wet, and he is not a fan, if you can't tell by his mad looking expression right now. Hi, baby. You're fine. You're fine, Toffee. The rain will let up. I know. Your playmates will be home soon. I've got to go get them in a few minutes. I know you're so adorable. I know. You've just been listening to me talk, thinking it's not fair. You're a silly puppy. You're a silly puppy.